Welcome to 2D6 Friday. Insert theme tune here. Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll wager that you have no idea right now whether you're looking at the front of my head or the back. Predictions now. Here we go. It was the front the whole time, of course. That's just the kind of crazy anything can happen atmosphere you should expect on a live show. I do not disappoint. We've got a plethora of topics to dive into tonight. The chat seems to be filling up nicely already. A couple of people have been in there for quite a while now. Chin wagging, as the saying goes. So, let's have a look to see who we've got in there, shall we, on the active users list. I expect this to grow throughout the show, as it usually does. But let's see who's in there right now. We've got Dreddy, we've got Mickey Genver, we've got Retropia TV, we've got Ruhark, and I think there was someone else in there earlier. But that chat has disappeared now because it was so long ago. So, folks, the prime topic of the evening is going to be tournament culture. The good, the bad. I'm not going to say the ugly because I don't want to insult the various tournament goers out there. So let's go with the beautiful instead. I think that's more appropriate, especially since they're tournaments I've attended. So the kind of level of attractiveness skyrockets through the roof as soon as I walk into the hall anyway. Apparently Mickey Genver was very confused by my mysterious pose at the start. And my hair is getting a bit wild now. I can actually nibble on it at the moment. Not that I want to, but the beard, of course, can also be used for nibbling purposes. If the audience weren't so attached to my hair, then I think I would probably have cut it by now. But I don't think the people would like that. There are a few people that would revolt, certainly. Apparently Newbie has fallen into a well, and that's why he's not here, according to Dreddy. Right then. So let's get this fascinating conversation kicked off, shall we? So, tournaments. I've been going to quite a few tournaments in recent months. The last one, Dead Zone, of course, which I'm sure everyone has seen my detailed 41-minute video on already. And previous to that, I went to 4 or 5 Kings of War tournaments, and before that it was Relics tournaments and a Warhammer tournament. I haven't been in a situation where I've been going to multiple different game system tournaments in a short period of time, but that could happen if the Dead Zone tournament scene picks up while I'm still attending Kings of War, because there are a few Kings of War tournaments coming up over the next month or so. So it's going to be quite hectic there. Warhammer Fantasy, I only went to the one big Adepticon tournament, which of course I had to travel halfway around the world to attend. Oh, we've got Juan Hidalgo Jules in the chat there. First live episode. Welcome. So that Warhammer Fantasy tournament, that's the furthest I've ever travelled for any wargaming, let alone tournament. So that was interesting for a variety of reasons that most of them aren't. But of course they're all interesting in their own special way. First of all, I'm going to talk about which game systems I was the most familiar with when attending the tournaments and whether that affected my overall standing. Because you would think being better at a game would mean that you would finish higher in the rankings. But that's not always the case if it's a really popular game and there are a lot of pros there, a lot of people who really know what they're doing. So let's start with Relics, shall we? Because that was my first real tournament experience. I must have been to about 6 Relics tournaments, somewhere around there. Normally I played the Newham, which are of course the masochistic naked dwarves who live in pain suits, and that was my faction of choice. And I finished 2nd and 3rd quite a bit. I think I finished in the top 3 maybe 3 or 4 times with them. And then in my first tournament, actually, it was when I had barely any experience at all with Relics and I was still learning the rules. And quite a few other people there were in the same boat because the game was really just starting to flourish. And then me and a few other people were diving in there at the deep end pretty much. But because the tournament scene was small and the whole community in general for relics was small, then really it wasn't really that competitive. It was more of a friendly atmosphere than you would generally see at any kind of tournament, because the people there knew that it was a small scene and they wanted to help invite everyone in with open arms. They didn't want to put anyone off by completely crushing them. So it was very, very inviting, and people informed me of various rules that benefited me and hindered them throughout the day. So that was a very fun experience, and that was one of the things that got me really into relics, that tournament day, that experience with those friendly people. And then as time went on, obviously I grew more skilled in relics until I became the international relics master and all-round legend of all things relics. And the first tournament I actually won, I think it was the last one I went to, and I decided to take Orknar. It was kind of a protest because the almighty Spud had won several relics tournaments with Orknar, and I was convinced that Orknar were completely broken and that anyone playing them would stand a decent chance of winning. So to try and prove that point, I made a fairly cheese Orknar list. So I didn't have a huge variety of models to choose from, but fairly cheese for the models that I had available. I think it was the most cheese I could have possibly squeezed out of it. And I took that list and steamrolled everybody and won the tournament. So I was quite pleased with that. Pleased to win a tournament, and pleased that not exactly proved that Orknar were broken, but to show that there was some validity to my claim, since I hadn't actually played one game with that faction before the tournament. Yet I still managed to beat everybody. So I'm going to assume that they're kind of being changed in Relics version 2, actually, the Orknar, but I think they're going to be toned down somewhat regardless. So that was quite a fun experience. Overall, though, the Relics community, very, very friendly with the tournaments. I don't know if any tournaments are still going, actually. Maybe down in the south of the country, but there certainly haven't been any in the north that I've been aware of in the recent times. It's a game that it kind of lends itself to tournament play, I think, because the rules in general are quite simple. There are one or two things which are annoying, which a lot of people just ignore, like morale, which thankfully is going away in the second edition. So as far as that goes, very good experiences. I can't think of any bad Relics tournament experiences that I've had. Let's move on to Warhammer Fantasy, but before we do that, let's have a look at what's going on in the comments, because it's flying past here at the moment. Oh, we've got Mini Warrior in here. Now, Mini Warrior, I've been watching some of your videos over the last few months, and I'm convinced that you have the fastest intro in the history of intros. I'm not talking about the little intro clip at the start. I'm talking about the way you speak. You introduce yourself faster than anyone else. I'm not sure if that's a conscious effort, but I tend to do that. If I've recorded a video like 8 times, I'm on like take number 9, then I'll kind of speak a lot faster because I'm so tired of saying it over and over and over and over. So it ends up sounding way too fast. So I'll have to go back and do it a 10th time and slow down a bit. But I would like to know what's going on with your incredibly fast introduction. Driddy can proudly say that she organised the first and only German Relics tournament and got last place. Yes, I do remember that video. The good old Relics tournament scene in Germany, which lasted for all of one tournament. It is a truly international game, though, because of the Hangout Relics, which may make a comeback at some point. So all 2 of you out there who watched those episodes live, you can be very pleased to hear that. Mickey Jenver says, at least you made it fun for others. I think she was responding to Driddy there. Yes, so if you organise a tournament for any game and you make sure it's fun, then you are to be admired, because there aren't enough people out there who are willing to set up tournaments for a start. And those that do, you don't want to be one of the ones that goes a little bit power mad, do you? Mickey Jenver, what is your favourite cheese, Andy? I'm thinking Red Leicester. No, it's not actually. Cheddar is very nice, but the grand cheese of them all is Wensleydale, which is closely followed by Cheshire and Lancashire as well, because they're very, very similar to Wensleydale. There are slight differences. One of them's, I think, slightly crumblier than the rest. Crumblier sounds like an English county, doesn't it? But I can't eat too much cheese nowadays because it makes me terribly ill. And they don't really do lacto-free versions of Wensleydale, which is incredibly frustrating. Let's see. Stu Gibson has popped in as well. Evening Wargamers. It's his first 2d6 Friday that he's caught live. Well, everyone has to catch something live, don't they? So why not this? And we've got MC1 Gamer in there as well. MC, I'm going to have to keep a serious eye on you. You're a well-known troublemaker in the community. I think this is his first live Friday, 2d6 Friday as well. Let's see. Apparently, Mini Warrior has cleared up the issue on his incredibly fast intro. He says it's just a reflex. So I think to attract new viewers, you may have to slow it down a bit because they might not be able to tell what it is you're saying. Let's see. There's an interesting comment here from Stu Gibson talking to Mickey Genver. It's been said 100 times, but your Glotkin is sublime. Maybe the strangest pickup line that I've ever seen in one of these chats. Yeah, interesting. So let's talk Warhammer Fantasy Tournament, shall we? Singular, because I only attended one, since, of course, by the time I really got into tournaments, it was kind of being phased out and then replaced with Age of Sigmar. I haven't been to any tournaments for that yet. But 8th edition Warhammer. And the main reason I actually went to a tournament was because I got the impression that it was going to be replaced by something. There were rumblings going on for quite a while that Warhammer was going to be phased out and replaced with something else. So I wanted to get one tournament in while it was still a thing, with the end times looming. So I decided, why not make it a big one? So all the way over to Adepticon, Warhammer tournament. And it wasn't the best of starts. Well, first of all, I only had about 1 hour's sleep per night. And then playing like 3 or 4 tournament games in a day of Warhammer 8th edition, which isn't usually the quickest game, is not ideal on that amount of sleep. So the only time it actually affected me, though, I think it was maybe game 3 or 4 on the first day. And I was kind of just sitting there, looking incredibly tired. And my opponent might have thought I was depressed or something because the game wasn't going very well, but I was actually just falling asleep. I had to go for a nap after that, before all the various evening festivities that go on at these things. But the first game was really, really bad because it was kind of random deployment, and all my units appeared out of range of the enemy, all my war machines, and all his war machines were actually in range because he had more cannons than I did, and I had more short-range weaponry. I had some organ guns. So I pretty much guaranteed loss immediately as soon as the game started, regardless of any strategy that I employed. So that wasn't the best of starts. And at least I got a little break, though, because that game did end incredibly fast, because most of my turns were simply, it's my turn, and now it's your turn again. I think I actually fired one weapon throughout the entire game, and that was it. Not an ideal start to my Warhammer Fantasy Tournament career. The other games got a bit better, because once you get a huge, shocking loss, you do plummet down the tables a bit and come up against other people that had huge, shocking losses. But that means that you get into the crowd of people who are looking a little bit depressed, though. Like my opponent in the second game, who was the only person I think who actually recognized me from the YouTube, so maybe it was just that he was starstruck as well. But he didn't look too pleased when I put down all my war machines, because they kind of blew him off the table. So I won that game, which zoomed me up again. And then by the nature of winning a game quite heavily, you zoom up into the path of someone else that's just won a game quite heavily. So then I got killed again and again. And then I think the last game, my opponent looked really depressed, because he's obviously been crushed a few times in a row as well. And he saw these war machines being put down, and he thought, oh God, not again. He was having flashbacks of all his previous games, I think. And he spent quite a lot of time talking to other people around the table, because he just seemed totally out of it and wasn't that interesting in the game at all. So I tried to make it as fun as possible. I'm not saying I intentionally lost by any means, but by about game 4, I was mainly shooting for the sportsmanship award. So I was cracking quite a lot of jokes and not overly concentrating on tactics by then. As far as any kind of drama, there's only really one incident where my opponent thought I had a rule wrong, or thought I was making up the rule or something. So I just found the page in the book and said, look, here it is, old bean. and that was the end of that. So that wasn't really too much drama at all. There are going to be incidents like that at tournaments when people are playing competitively and you just don't believe what the opponent is saying, or you think they've just got it wrong and they've forgotten how it works. I think it was something to do with the organ guns, because they are so powerful that surely no one will believe it. Let's have a look at the comments again. Let's see here. Retropia TV, I run a dwarf gun line for tournaments and I got used to that face. Yes, even though it was my first tournament and I wasn't using any cheese strategies, I wasn't corner camping or anything like that, people still gave the old look as soon as I put the army down, even though they had no idea how I was going to play and they didn't know what kind of attitude I was bringing to the table. They were kind of judging me based on the list, unfortunately. And that probably got my sportsmanship score down a little bit as well. I wouldn't be surprised, because I didn't win it. Andy brought his special rulebook that he printed himself to the tournament. That is actually an excellent idea. I may have to consider that. Could definitely try that one out. Mickey Gender, probably not the most fun games. Yeah, most of the games at that tournament weren't actually that much fun. I felt like I was fairly knowledgeable in Warhammer, but there are just things that I wouldn't spot because I hadn't played huge amounts of games. A lot of the games I played of 8th edition were on universalbattle.com rather than actually in person. And there are things that you just don't see when you're looking at the gaming table, because there are so many other things going on around you that can distract your attention rather than having everything focused on the computer screen. I did actually play a tournament on Universal Battle as well at one point. It was kind of more of a friendly tournament though, because obviously there's no prizes on offer or anything. But the most sporting thing I did there was someone had left one of his units that was holding a critical part of the battlefield. If that died, he would have instantly lost the game. And he put it right next to, or within range of, a mortis engine, which had a pulse that would fly out and attack anything within that certain distance. And he didn't know about that. So I told him, look, are you sure you want to have that unit there? Because this will probably kill it immediately if you leave it there. So he said, okay, I'll move it then. So if I'm going to win a game, I'd rather win it because my strategy was superior to my opponent, not because they just didn't know one of the rules or they forgot to move a unit. So if I see something that someone's forgetting, I'll remind them. If they're about to throw less dice than they're meant to, or they forgot that a unit has extra attacks now, then I'll remind them if I remember. I'm not just going to sit on that information to give myself an advantage. Although I know a lot of people at tournaments probably would do that because they look at it as it's not their responsibility to do that. So let's go on to Kings of War tournaments, shall we? I've been to quite a few of those. I was somewhat familiar with the rules going in, but not as familiar as I was with Warhammer. So the first couple were quite a good learning experience, and I was using undead in those because my goblin army wasn't ready yet. And I'd played quite a few games with them beforehand. I wasn't an expert by any means, but especially with undead, because they've got the whole shambling and the surge business, there's a lot more to consider with undead in terms of movement. So if you position your unit a certain way, you normally think, okay, well, they're safe there, or I can't get this kind of charge, can't get a flank charge or a rear charge in this position. But when you start thinking with the surge as well, and how much surge you're likely to get, then it kind of opens up a whole new dimension. It's like seeing the fourth dimension of movement strategy for that army. And if you've never played against them or with them before, then it's hard to wrap your head around at first. So I think it was good to play undead in a couple of tournaments before I went onto the goblins, because then when I came up against undead in the future, I was much more well equipped to look out for that. And as far as the atmosphere at those tournaments, they've all been very good. I haven't really come up against anyone that had any issues. I know there's been not major unfriendliness, but there have been people who maybe didn't agree on something, or someone was just in a bad mood on different tables. It had nothing to do with my games, though. I don't think I've encountered anyone in Kings of War that was kind of in a mood or anything. I haven't had too many disputes. So overall, that's been very good as well. And with my performance in those tournaments, I've done relatively well considering I haven't had the cheesiest lists available. A lot of people will sit down with the rule book, pick out an army list that they think is likely to win or that they think would be fun to play, and then they'll go out and acquire all those models and then paint them really quick, often sloppily, and then just shove them on the table. Some people can paint really well, really fast, but some people don't. So the fact I just kind of collected my army based on what I thought looked cool, and then finally got round to the rules and made a list out of them. I don't buy models specifically to fit them into the list. So people usually do it the other way around. So in theory, I should be finishing kind of bottom tier at these tournaments with that kind of approach. But in general, my finishing position has been around about average, which I'm quite happy with, considering a lot of the people at these Kings of War tournaments are the kind of big names that have won quite a lot of tournaments in the past or have finished high up, and have played against a few people that were more competitive in the game, but never to the extent of them being annoying to play against yet. I'm sure it'll happen one day that someone I play against will just be in a really foul mood in Kings of War, but it's yet to happen. The thing with attending tournaments for me in general, it can be quite a stressful experience going into a tournament against people you've never met before, because you don't know what kind of attitude they're going to have. I'm not really stressed about how my army's going to perform. I'm more worried about like other people's emotions. So I'm really in tune with other people's emotional states. So if someone's kind of upset or embarrassed or something, then that can make me quite anxious, which I don't like. Although you wouldn't know, because I'm usually cracking jokes all the time. Even if my opponent is in a bad mood, I'm still going to be joking, because I want to quite kind of lower the tension or change the atmosphere around the game, or just have as much fun as possible. And if that means jokes, then so be it. My atmosphere towards the games as well, I'm trying to win, because if you're going into a tournament and you're not trying to win, then I think you're actually hurting the experience for everybody else. If you're intentionally kind of sabotaging your own play and stopping yourself from winning by being silly, or just by not caring and not even thinking about it and just pushing your troops across the table, or having them all facing the wrong way for a laugh, then you are actually going to hinder the experience for everyone else, I think. There's no fun in defeating someone if you know they've kind of handicapped themselves. So you have to try to win, but try to win with your strategy, I would say, rather than with trying to squeeze the most cheese you can, or trying to take advantages that aren't strictly on the battlefield. There are little things that I've seen at tournaments that I wouldn't do, that I've seen other people doing, and that I've talked about this with a couple of people recently. There's kind of a gap between what I would do in a tournament and what I will allow my opponent to get away with. I wouldn't move any of my troops like an extra millimeter, or if I knock the table by accident and they move, I'll put them back. If my opponent moves an extra ½ inch, I'm not going to call them out on it though, because I'm not that bothered about it, and I'd rather not start an argument over that. So I think that gap with me is quite wide, of how far I will go and how far I'm going to let my opponent go before I say anything. If there's something factual, like I see them about to roll too many dice, then I'll ask them whether it's correct based on my understanding of the rules, or I'll ask them, is that the right interpretation of the rule there? I won't tell them they're wrong. But often, if it's just a matter of their judgment isn't that great, like in Warhammer 8th edition, if someone scatter dice, people are so terrible at that, actually, moving the like the artillery and the templates from the scatter dice. I'm kind of glad scatter dice have disappeared, because people are so really, really bad at, I'm not sure whether they're bad intentionally or not, maybe it's just by accident, but people just can't navigate themselves correctly. They can't get themselves oriented sufficiently so that they're moving it in the right direction. But I wouldn't call someone out on that, because that's really, it's kind of my opinion that they're doing it wrong, especially if the dice has already been moved, or if they've already moved the unit. So I can't pinpoint exactly where they were before, so I can't tell them exactly how much they've moved. I've just kind of by eye, I can tell they've moved a little bit too far. So I'm not going to complain about that. I know a lot of people would though, and if they forget something in the previous phase and want to go back and do it, then I'm quite happy to let them, as long as it's not like 4 turns ago. But if we haven't moved on to any great degree, if the unit that would be affected by them going back and having another go at it hasn't had any impact on the game yet, then I'll quite happily go back. And even then, sometimes I'll try and wind back as much as possible and kind of undo things that that unit has done. If it gets to a point where it's too much hassle, obviously, then usually they wouldn't even try if that much has gone by. But occasionally people do. But I've seen people that won't even go back like one phase. Like, I forgot to move this unit, do you mind if I do? And the opponent will say, like, no. And I don't think I would ever really do that. And I'd also, if it affected the way I would move, I would say, yes, you can do that, if you don't mind me kind of going back to the start of my movement phase then, because that model being there will affect where I want to move this. So I would obviously throw that in there. Let's see what people are saying here before we go on. Wasgob, I like to win by crushing my foes beneath my hobnailed boot, destroying their villages, and hearing the lamentation of their women. Yes, I'm sure you do. Let's see. There's some interesting conversation going on in here. I'm not sure it's entirely related to what I'm talking about, though, which is entirely unacceptable. Here we go. MC1 Gamer. You need to do a series on game etiquette. Most people could use some proper guidance. I don't know about most people. Some people definitely could. Maybe, I don't know, in your region. I don't know if people around there could use a lot more guidance. But mostly in the UK, it's been pretty good. So, where was I? Right. So, the best opponents that I've had are the ones that take the game seriously, but they're having fun. They don't have such a laid-back attitude that they don't care, but they're also trying to inject fun into it. So that means you keep the seriousness up here, and you keep the fun coming out of here, is a good way of putting it. Serious in the mind, you're thinking about strategy, but when you talk, you're giving across a kind of fun tone for your opponent. So you're going to kind of put them at ease, make it sound as if you're relaxed, even if in your brain the cogs are going round, the cogs of strategy, that is, and you may have some master plan, but you don't need that seriousness and that tension to actually come out of your mouth across the gaming table. I think that is a really good way of describing what I'm after in an opponent. And I think I make a pretty good opponent in general, just because I do like to have a lot of fun and I let people get away with a lot. Because to me, like I said before, I want to win because my strategy was superior, not because someone forgot to move one of their units or because they forgot that a unit has a particular rule. If I see someone positioning a unit in a certain way, thinking they're safe, but I know for a fact one of my units has some kind of shenanigan rule where they can attack them anyway, then it's a pretty good chance I'm just going to tell them that. Let's see. Bazooka J. Rambo, what is he talking about here? He's talking about something totally unrelated. I'm going to have to give him his first warning here. Unacceptable conversation. I think they might be talking about... They're talking about dystopian wars. Someone is. Mini Warrior. Yeah, I've seen a few comments on that in there. Of course, that's totally irrelevant to this video because that's not a game I've ever really looked into. MC1 Gamer, Andy, you are too nice. I watch my foes like a hawk, remeasure to make sure they aren't squeezing in a millimeter here or there, and even weigh their dice. Well, I'm sure you're joking, but I know people that are actually like that. Often, I won't even be looking when someone's moving their models. If it's Kings of War, for example, I'll barely be paying attention when they're moving their army. The only time that would really matter is if they moved into an advantageous position. But what I'll do is, when I'm moving my army, I'll position them, and then I'll kind of measure the distance between and say to my opponent, are you satisfied that I have positioned myself outside of your charge range? And then if they say yes, then I'll leave them there. And if they say no, then I'll say, okay, how about now? Move my unit back a little bit until they're happy with it. The same thing with line of sight. I'll position myself and then say, are you happy that if I leave this unit here, it's out of your line of sight before I finish moving it? And if they say, actually, I can still see them, then I can just kind of shift them off to the side a bit, rather than on their turn, them stealing an extra ½ inch and suddenly them being in charge range and me thinking, wait a minute, I left myself out of your charge range. And then they could just say, well, you never said that. I measured it and it was right. So it does take a lot of the worry about that kind of thing out of it if you just clarify with your opponent exactly how far away things are. If you have an intention to stay out of range or out of sight, then state that when you're doing it. So while you've still got time to jiggle them around a bit, not wait until they want to charge and then they start pushing it forward and suddenly they find they're in range, even though technically they shouldn't be. MC1 Gamer, yes, I'm joking. Now, I think you are, Mr. MC. I don't think you're that bad at all. Was Gob, I don't let my foes anywhere near their models. I do all the moving myself, can't be too careful. That would be one way to be safe, wouldn't it? MC1, to be truthful, I help the people I play with even if it's to my detriment. I've lost plenty of games being a good sport and had a blast enjoying the outcomes. I feel I've won if we both had a good time. Yes, because really, what kind of prize is going to be on offer in these tournaments? Unless it's a huge monetary prize, in which case then I probably would take it very, very seriously. Then why? Why get yourself too worked up about squeezing the fun out of it for the sake of winning over an extra millimeter? Retropia TV, I'm overly generous with my opponent. I tend to watch the people in my club, wants the people in my club to have a good time, so the many games I took a defeat just keep them smiling. Yes, there are times where I'm not going to say I've cheated in reverse, but there are things in games where I could have taken a particular move to win, and then I kind of didn't do it because I either didn't want the game to end then and there, or I wanted to make it more fun. And if I sensed my opponent was kind of on the verge of it not being fun, then I would possibly head in that direction. Less so in a tournament, because I think people should expect you to do your utmost in terms of not stretching the boundaries of the rules or anything to your advantage, and not actually cheating, but doing everything within your power, within the rules to win, that isn't kind of nitpicking what they're doing. From your side, though, do what's within your powers. Use your most cunning strategies, I would say. And that way it'll be more satisfying for people who are going to beat you as well. Mickey Jen, but apparently there'll be huge prizes at RemCon. I don't know about that. I'm pretty sure the Andy Palooza prizes will be far superior to that. MC1 Gamer, every die roll causes my opponents pain and I relish in it. I regenerate my wounds and it invigorates my stamina. Right, I'm going to consult my old notes document here because, as you can tell, this is a very professional show. Let's see if there's anything I've not covered yet when it comes to tournaments. Okay, yes. So you have to think about what is the main goal that you have going into a tournament. Is it that you want to win? For example, is there a prize on offer? Is it just having fun? Is it helping other people learn the game, or is it learning yourself? Because I tend to approach tournaments as a learning experience for me and to help my opponent have a good time. If I think my tactics were good enough to win, but my opponent did something maybe a bit underhanded, or they bent the rules a little bit and they ended up winning because of it, that doesn't stop me in my mind from thinking, yeah, I think my strategy was sound there. If I use that strategy all the time, I'm going to do well and I'm going to win some tournaments probably. Because I know that if all things were equal, then I probably would have won. It's the same thing when it comes down to dice rolls. If you're the kind of person who, if the dice are against you, gets in a really, really bad mood, then I think that's not really a good thing. I think you should be looking inside more rather than what's going on the table. If you did everything right to win and the dice rolls let you down, you had below average luck, then okay, you can be a little bit cheesed off, but you don't want to let that seep into your overall enjoyment, I think. If your strategy was sound and it was just bad luck, then you should, in some ways, you should be comforted knowing that your strategy works. And if you just keep at it, eventually the luck's going to turn. That's just the nature of luck. You're not going to get unlucky every time. Well, someone out there is. Just by the law of averages, there's going to be someone that rolls virtually nothing but ones in every game out there. Yeah. But hopefully none of you out there are those people. Retropia TV, when are we patrons getting our free 2D6 t-shirts? Hey, I never said anything about free t-shirts. Let's see. Adam Johnson. So the second round he would get... Oh, no, he's got another comment for that. One bad tourney experience we had was locally. A very good player of a game system in a 3-round tournament would deliberately try to win the first round as closely as possible. Yeah, so we'd get placed against a lower skilled player in the second round. I have heard a lot about people doing that. If you win the first round by a huge margin, you're going to get matched up against some other absolute monster. Whereas if you just win by a narrow margin, then you'll face someone slightly weaker while the monsters battle each other and one of them has to lose, so that the first time you'll face an absolute beast could be in the final round, so that you have less monsters to get through, essentially. So yeah, I see what you're saying there, and I've heard a lot about people doing that. I've also heard about tournaments where people will kind of intentionally draw against each other because they've both already qualified. In some tournaments where it's kind of elimination system, or if they're both kind of level on points, and to give themselves both a chance of winning in the final round, they'll kind of make an agreement with each other because they're both scared of the other person's army. They'll just say, okay, let's just call this one a draw. And then we're both still in with a chance of in the final round because none of those other armies are quite as scary. And then it'll just be whoever can trounce the opposition the most in the final round will win. But it's guaranteed to be one of us and we're buddies. So let's do it like that. I've definitely heard a lot of stories about that. I don't think I've personally experienced anything like that, though. So I would say if I have really bad luck in a game, it actually makes the game more fun. I don't get put out by the dice going against me. Some of my most fun tournament experiences were because I had really terrible dice rolls. I'm sure you've seen in some of my tournament videos, there was one Kings of War game where I had some ridiculous nerve rolls. Like I just needed 4 to destroy units on numerous occasions, and I rolled nothing but 2s and 3s, virtually throughout the entire game. There's like 10 nerve rolls where it was obscene odds of failing even one of them, and I failed all of them. And it actually makes it a memorable game. Next time I come up against that player, we're going to be able to have a good laugh about that. And if I have bad luck again, it's going to be even funnier. And it doesn't bruise my ego or make me feel like less of a competent general because the dice went against me. It just means the dice went against me. That's not going to happen every time. It doesn't mean I'm terrible at the game. There are people, of course, who are in big competitions playing for huge prizes, big wads of cash and so on, and the dice going against them, I could understand why that would be annoying. But then it wasn't your money to start with. So unless you bet your house on the outcome of a dice roll, then I could see some legitimate reasons, but then you shouldn't be betting what you can't afford to lose. And your ego might be in there. Because I know a lot of people do attach a lot of personal ego to whether they win or lose in tournaments, and that can definitely cause a lot of, in some cases I'm sure it could cause cheating, because they want other people to perceive them as this glorious general, and at the end of the day, all other people are going to see is the win or loss. They're not going to know about the bad luck. So I can understand if people have their ego firmly rooted within that tournament. You see that in the likes of professional sports as well. People who are obviously competing for huge amounts of money, so they cheat a little bit. Let's see. Rusty Muscular. I don't think I've seen that name before. At Adepticon, they host a game where everyone antes up a model from their army. The winner gets to put the other players' betted models in a meat grinder while the losers watch. That sounds like quite a fun idea. And I think that it would be more fun if people put a little bit of effort into the models that are up for that. That would actually be fun. As long as they knew that was the case beforehand, and everyone like painted up a model to a reasonably high standard beforehand, I think that would be a lot of fun actually, because you've still got pictures of the model. So there's still a record that you painted a model that was this nice, and you've taken part in something that was quite funny as well. Sounds like a good idea. Let's see. MC1 Gamer is giving Dreddy some marketing ideas, I think, here. Of course, the Dread Cave merchandise is already selling like hotcakes, as she rightly points out there. The Dreddy cushion, I believe, is incredibly popular. I don't have one of them, because I don't need a cushion for this seat just yet. Maybe when it's already quite a few years old, this seat, but it's still quite soft and luxurious, actually, much like my hair. Still needs a bit of time. Retropia TV, when it comes to Warhammer, I've always picked the underdog armies and had a blast trying to run them in competitive environment. Yes, this is another thing. Taking less competitive armies into a competitive war zone, on the one hand, you're kind of protecting your ego, because even if you get crushed, you've got the kind of crutch of, well, I was playing a terrible army. No one expects me to win. And then if you do win, obviously all the accolades are doubled because you were playing such a terrible army. But also, you know you're not very likely to win. So it's kind of a trade-off ego-wise, I think, with playing really weak armies. Halfling Pete, for example, who I haven't played against in a really long time, but he always picked the weakest army possible. And I'm sure it was partially so if he does win a game, he could just rub it in everyone's face. And if he does lose, then there's no shame in it. If you lose with halflings, no one's going to laugh at you, are they? And if you even have a close game, you can kind of claim a moral victory. So I do take some uncompetitive armies, like in bolt action with the Belgians. I chose them because that's funny, but I could see how someone playing against them can be in a no-win situation. Because if they win, okay, it's only the Belgians, you're expected to beat them. The word heavy only appears about once in their entire army list, and they have more rules that are bad than rules that are good. They have more rules that like give them extra slow tanks, and that mean you have to like put your dice back if you come out the bag first and let the opponent draw another one if they feel like it, because you're so ill prepared for war. There are more rules like that than there are good rules for the Belgians. So if someone is playing against you and they lose, that is like the ultimate shame. So I can see how someone with an ego might not like to play against the weaker armies in those circumstances, unless they just manage to crush them every time, in which case I'm sure they'll be very pleased. As far as Warhammer, I haven't particularly played an overpowered or an incredibly weak army. I think dwarves were, for the most part, when I've played with them, have been kind of middling. I don't think they've ever been overpowered. I don't think anyone would ever accuse them of that. And back in the day, I did used to play Chaos Warriors, though, in Warhammer. Can't remember which edition it was, but it was when around the time the Realm of Chaos box came out with the Chaos gift cards. And some people said they were overpowered then because Chaos Knights were immune to Strength 3 attacks, because they had a 1+ armor save, and back then rolling a 1 wasn't an auto fail. So anything that didn't modify your armor, you just couldn't hurt Chaos Knights. So people did think they were very, very overpowered. Let's see. MC1 Gamer, I have a great deal of respect for tourney players who bring the lowest powered list to a match. Yes, it's not just about the army you pick, it's also about the list. If you take a list that's fun, and maybe it's something that you saw in the fluff and you were inspired, maybe a particular general had certain units at his disposal and not everything else that you would normally like to take, and you take a nice fluffy list. Although some people would say, well, this is a themed list. I've spammed the same unit 8 times. So I'm not going to include those people in this. Rusty Muscular. Andy 2D6. I always catch the Andy and Rem show late due to leaving work around now, so normally I never get a chance to join in on the fun of any of your live shows. Well, you are missing quite a wondrous experience, as you can see right now in the chat. Dreddy says Chaos Amazon gift cards. That would be amazing. If I could send someone an Amazon gift card that would immediately kill the Wood Elf character Score the Falconer before the game's even started, that would be amazing. That's all I ever used the Chaos gifts for, by the way. I killed him with them in every single game, because it was just something small, like you can do D6 wounds to a unit. So I'd always pick a little character to cast it on, and it was always just happened to be him. Right, let's see. What else have I got on tournaments? Right. I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover for the most part. Unless anyone else has any questions on tournament play. I think I've covered most of the things I wanted to there. Trivia TV. When I listen to all episodes, I tend to click back to the video wanting to comment and realize it's not live. Yes, that is a thing, but you should always leave permanent comments, and you can always put a little time code in there to avoid having to go really crazy clarifying exactly what you were responding to. Juan says, I played an all-skink army back in 6th edition, was amazing and fun. In fact, I even got to win a fair amount of games, even came second on a tournament. That's interesting. And I think in 8th edition, skinks were actually the ultimate cheese, weren't they? So you can see how it turns around. If you have a particular model collection and you play it through multiple editions of a game, suddenly, if they become more powerful because it's a line they want to sell, then you can be accused of being some kind of cheesemonger, even though you've had those models for the last 10 years. A lot of my dwarves, for example, I had since about the year 2000. So if anyone thought I went back in time, or went forward in time even, and looked at what was on the tournament scene in 15 years, and then went back and bought my dwarf models for those reasons, I would question your sanity. Yep, he played skinks before it was a thing. What is the largest tournament game in your area? I'm going to assume he's talking to me. Tournaments round here I would imagine it's probably 40k, but I don't pay any attention to those because I'm not that interested in 40k, especially from a competitive standpoint. I think that rule set, much like Age of Sigmar, is best played in a fun environment where you're kind of making up your own silly scenario, because 40k I don't think is in any way balanced. Not at all, especially not the armies that I like to play, like Deathwing. They're horribly underpowered, I think. So I wouldn't know about that. I know there's a reasonable amount of the likes of X-Wing that goes on around here, but again, that's not really my thing. I like an army that shows me something about my opponent's personality, and most people just don't paint X-Wing. Same reason I don't like coming up against unpainted armies, really. I like the army in front of me to be a reflection of me and how much effort I'm going to put into my army. Like with my Dead Zone Plague at the moment, I'm really proud of how they look. So I'm very happy to put them on the table. My Kings of War Goblins, I think, look really cool as well. The regular Goblins don't look that great, but that's just because the models are pretty terrible, the standard Kings of War Goblin. The Trolls are really nice, though, and I think I've made them look good as well. Let's see. A couple of people talking about 40k tournaments now. What have I created? Some kind of beast. Okay, there are a couple of other things I want to touch on in this episode as well. If anyone else has any more tournament topics to discuss, then drop them in the chat. But until then, a couple of things I want to look at here. So I'm going to fire up the old screen share. Here we go. So we have got some Mantic stuff here. Warpath, which has been kind of an on-again, off-again thing that Mantic have been doing for a long time now. It looks like they're almost ready to actually get this rolling, though. And they're releasing some new models for it, which interests me because they tie in with Dead Zone as well. They're all cross-compatible. So I think some of these humans are new. They've never been available separately before. There you go. And the ones that interest me, well, I like Forge Fathers, but I'm not going to play them. Plague, of course, since I just painted up some Plague. And the Stage 3s, which are kind of irregular troopers, have got a brand new plastic kit, I believe. And I think the dogs are new as well. I'm not sure. Yeah, there's some dogs there. I think there are new dogs and new Stage 3 troops, which look pretty cool, actually. The big guy and the guy going for a hug in the background and all them, they're still the same. And I think the Plague Zombies are the same there as well. But these guys are definitely new. So it's nice to see them revisiting some of the ranges, and it's nice to see them having some releases for the army that I am currently playing in Dead Zone. And if I were to get into Warpath, which I think some people I know are willing to give a try, then I would presumably be playing them in there as well. Since I've already got some painted, it would make sense. So it'll be nice to see. Be interesting to see whether they give them their own little supplement with their own rules as well. There's some of the Plague models currently that don't have any rules, as far as I'm aware. So it'll be interesting to keep my eyes peeled for all of that. Something else that I'm looking at is the Dreadball Kickstarter, of course, which is almost over now. It's done over double its initial funding now. And I'm going to compare it to the other Mantic Kickstarters in a minute. But the one thing that I wasn't sure of was what has actually changed in the rules. But I'm going to look at the changes to the rules, the proposals, in a minute, because I actually quite like them now that I've looked at what they are. They've kind of shrouded. They didn't really give you too much information on the Kickstarter page. Because new models don't really interest me because I've already got plenty of teams. And I'm not going to stop playing my Blue Moon keys, the Zs. So I think this guy here, I'm not sure, actually it might be the commentators that aren't unlocked yet. Let's have a look. Because they haven't reached all their stretch goals yet. I imagine they were anticipating it doing a bit better, this Kickstarter. But let's have a look. Don't you just love Kickstarters when you have to scroll down for 10 minutes to find everything? Here we go. So there's the pledge levels, but where are the stretch goals, darn it? Come on. Stretch goals, there we go. So 1,750 backers, the commentators. They haven't reached this goal yet. I'm not sure whether they will, actually. Let's look up again. They've got a bit of time to go. I'm not sure whether they'll get that one. Backers, I think they've got this one. I think that's a team. Stretch goal, 170,000. Let's see. It looks like they may get that one. They may well reach that. Wouldn't be surprised at all. Team captain for the Matsudan Tectonics, which I think are the big sumo lizard people. Mickey Jun versus Cheeks has left these Kickstarters in the dust. Yes, it certainly has. Cheeks has taken the world by storm. I was especially happy with the German version, actually, because obviously that's a whole other market that's just opened up. And I wasn't sure whether a game that wasn't designed by a German person, so it doesn't have a distinctive German flavour, would be taken to heart by them. But clearly it was. All this stuff has been unlocked. So I'm going to have a look at the potential rules for Dreadball now, because as you know, I am a Dreadball veteran. I never played that many games in a competitive format. I didn't attend any tournaments, but I'm mostly familiar with all the rules, especially the basic rules, since I did a How to Play Dreadball series, so I had to be somewhat familiar with them. So they don't want to change rules for the sake of change is one of the issues here. So while I was expecting it to undergo major changes the same way Dead Zone did, for example, removing the cards and replacing them and the coaching dice with some kind of dice that have different symbols on each side to let you perform different actions, apparently they're probably not going that route, because they feel that the coaching dice and the card mechanic actually works for Dreadball. And I never really had a huge problem with it anyway. So that doesn't turn me off too much there. A couple of things I want to look at, though. First of all, they're thinking of adding in a stat. Well, they're rebalancing a lot of the teams for a start, which is a good sign, because I think that was an issue before, because they had about 24 teams, I think, in the space of a couple of years, which is very, very difficult to balance. One thing they're looking at here is adding the agility stat, which makes a lot of sense to me, because just because you're fast doesn't mean that you're particularly agile. Just because you can run really fast in a straight line doesn't mean that you can dodge from side to side. So that allows them to add in a lot more variety in the stat lines, I think. You could have some big hulking thing that is actually quite fast, but then you could have a really low agility stat, so it wouldn't be able to dodge out the way of things, which would make perfect sense to me. But at the moment, kind of speed and agility were rolled into one almost in the first edition. So that's a good change in my opinion. And that allows them to have changes between the factions that aren't simply special rules tacked on, which add a level of complexity, which I don't think is important. Now, this one is a very important rule here for me. Jacks are going to change significantly. This affects me big time, because the Z's that you can see there and are my team of choice, every single player is a Jack. So making them better is only going to be good for me. So what they're doing here is adding that Jacks can now take a full run action as part of a slam, steal, or throw. Now, for anyone not familiar with Dreadball, previously the Jack players, which are kind of the Jack of all trades, they're not a striker, they're not a guard, they're in the middle. They can do a little bit of everything, but they can't do it well. Previously, they could only move one space before they perform another action, rather than being able to move the full distance, like a striker could move the full distance before throwing the ball, and a guard could move the full distance before slamming into somebody, but Jacks couldn't. And that was especially annoying for the Z's, because they're so terrible at moving the ball around. If they've got the ball in their hand and they want to throw it, then they can only move one space before they do so, which is really irritating, because it means you have to do a lot more throwing, which they're really terrible at. So you can see how that would be bad. So the ability to move further with them before you throw it can only be a good thing. Obviously, you can do less throwing, and you'll be able to get closer to the target before you throw, which will make it easier. So I think that's a very, very good move, personally. I think that's going to affect me greatly. It's going to affect my enjoyment of the Z's, who I always felt were funny, but not at all powerful. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Also, keepers. Interesting, introducing the keepers, which were kind of in there before. It was an upgrade you could get onto a guard, I think, in league play. Unless you just throw in the upgrades in casual games as well. But a keeper, here, it says that when standing in a strike zone, they actually count as threatening any strike zone from that zone. So that means if you've got a keeper standing around about the area of the goal, then they can actually defend it without you taking the shot from right next to them, which I think is another really good move. You don't have to like completely lock down the target by surrounding it with players, which is kind of annoying because you don't have that many players on the pitch. So to completely surround the goal takes a lot of players out of the game. So having just one guy who can defend it on his own, that makes quite a big difference, I think. So that's a change I'm approving of at this time. Team captains as well. Something that I think this is going to be more for league play, a lot of this stuff with MVPs. Of course, you can just use whatever you want in casual games, though. But MVPs were quite difficult to put into your team. They were quite expensive. So just having general team captains, which you'd be able to acquire cheaper, I think, from having a read through of this earlier, I think that's going to be a good move. And multiples of the same MVPs as well, I think, is a thing. Something to do with cloning in there. I haven't read all of that bit yet, because a lot of this relates to leagues, which haven't been that essential to me, since I don't know that many people that play it. Here's another one that's going to be great for me. Fouls. Okay. The main tactic with the Z's is to commit fouls. A lot. Have too many players on the pitch, kick people while they're down, and so on. But you can get sent off. So what it says here is that the foul is likely to be spotted more easily, but it's going to be more difficult to get sent off, which was always my issue, because my little monkeys could just be completely sent off for the entire game, virtually, which was really annoying because my advantage was having more players. So if they're all getting sent off, then there's my advantage gone right there. So I don't mind being caught slightly more often, as long as there's less chance of my players being actually removed from play. So I'm pleased with that. And Dreadball Ultimate, I've never played that, but apparently the changes are that they close off certain areas of the pitch when that player isn't there. So the ball can't like bounce into a zone where no one is inhabitant. There are no inhabitants in there, basically, which I think is a good move. Keep the play in the designated areas rather than spreading out all over the place into no man's land. So I like the sound of that, but I've never played it though, so I'm sure someone who's more familiar with Dreadball Ultimate would have a better idea. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with those proposed changes, and that definitely makes me want to crack my Z's out in the next edition. I was kind of take it or leave it. I wasn't particularly bothered whether I played Dreadball again, but I think looking at these changes, it's perked up my interest a bit. So very, very happy with that. Let's get off this screen share so you can see my wonderful face again. And let's head into the chat and see what's going on in there, shall we? I remember years ago trying to build a top-down, old-school GTA-style Gorkamorka game with a game builder. Didn't get very far. That was the Stronghold that said that. Yes, game design. It's not an easy task. It's only for us few elites, I'm afraid. It's not really. Anyone can design a game. If you've got an imagination, then you're already a game designer in your own head. If you can put ideas down, you have designed a game. For those of us that used to make board games as children, then it's like the ultimate, actually having a game that you've created become an actual product. And when I see it, if I see it on a shelf or in someone's hand being played somewhere, not set up by me, just organically, if I see cheeks in someone's hands, if I see someone with their hands wrapped firmly around my cheeks, it's going to make me very happy. Let's see. Not on topic from, this is Retropy TV. His daughter has apparently fallen in love with Dreddy's channel. Yeah, I think Dreddy's going to have to tone down the foul language then, big time. If there are small children watching. I don't know if there are any children watching this channel, but you may have noticed I don't swear anyway. There are plenty of inappropriate jokes on here, but I think they're all subtle enough so that children wouldn't be corrupted by them. Mini Warrior, I think an agility stat might open the door to more complex stuff we don't need. He's talking about Dreadball there. It could do, but I think at the moment it's too simple for the amount of teams there are, and too many of them rely on having a special rule to differentiate them. Like, you'll just look at a team stat line and think, wait a minute, they're just humans. Oh, but they have this special rule that allows them to do this that humans can't. Okay, that's how they're different. So I'd rather see it, more of it reflected in the stat lines rather than special rules, definitely. I think that would actually simplify things in a way. Unless they just add a billion more teams and make it even more complicated, which they could do. They do have a history of adding in, I would say, too many teams. Let's hope they don't do that this time. And people talking about swearing on YouTube now. Retrobia TV thinks that Dreddy's channel is fine compared to most other channels. Yeah, a lot of people do swear a lot. For me, I was just brought up in a household where people just didn't swear and it wasn't considered acceptable. And that's pretty much it. So it doesn't naturally flow out of my mouth. If I was acting in a film or something and the script called on me to swear, then I'd quite happily do it. Just the same way that I would be quite happy to play the part of Hitler or something. That doesn't mean I have any Nazi views or anything like that. Let's see. Mini Warrior, game designing is fun, but getting to typing the rules is a pain. Yes. Putting ideas down is fun. Having ideas is fun. Actually structuring them correctly, not so much. You can get bogged down a bit and it does become a chore. And this is one thing I hate. It's number crunching and going through rigorous testing with a game. A lot of the games I design are quite simplistic, so they don't require the same amount of testing as something like a full-scale miniatures war game, which is, of course, totally nuts, the amount of stat cross-referencing that you have to do to make sure this unit isn't better than this in certain areas and that the points values are all correct. It must be an absolute nightmare. But I generally approach with a more fun attitude. And then if someone tells me something is overpowered, then maybe I can correct it. But I really don't like number crunching at all in games. Let's see. Oric Love God, which is an excellent name. Not swearing is a good thing. It shows you have something to say and have put some thought into it. I find that a lot of people kind of insert swear words into sentences in place of using their mind to come up with a more appropriate word. But other people actually use it purely for emphasis, I would say, and do actually have quite a wide vocabulary anyway. So it depends on the individual. Some people do go over the top and it's unnecessary, but in some cultures, in some societies, the places some people were raised, it's just perfectly normal. And you're not going to encourage it out of them at all, unless they're on live TV and then you can tell them not to swear. But you see live on the air sports people and so on who will accidentally swear because it's just something they do every day. It's just something humans do. You can't look down on people for swearing. It's just a thing that exists. You're never going to get it out of people. There are just some people that don't do it for one reason or another. I think everyone in my family is pretty much the same. It's not because of religion or anything. It's just the way we were raised to think it was wrong, so it doesn't automatically work its way into our vocabulary. That's just how we roll. Retrobia TV. Here in northern British Columbia, it seems to be a cultural thing to swear. I think it's cultural everywhere, to be honest. There are very few places, I would say, that don't swear. I'm sure even the Queen has uttered a few obscenities in her time. Wouldn't be surprised at all. Maybe not in public. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things that I'm working on, shall we? So the thing I'm painting at the moment, which I'm actually really happy with how it's coming along. Now, I know this is 2D6 Friday, which is like the non-Age of Sigmar zone, but the things I'm painting, one of them is Age of Sigmar related, and I want to show it you here. Let's have a nice close-up of that. Look at that lovely focus on this webcam. I mean, it's going in and out of focus a bit, but I think you get the gist of it. It's coming along quite nicely, this guy. I'm really happy with that bit of dry brushing effect I've got on the scales there, which is just a bit of white over the layers of dry brushed purple. So I really like how this is going, and I've actually ordered more of them after painting this one so far, because it's not been daunting at all to paint, and I've actually enjoyed it. So I've gone out and ordered some more. Also, I'm painting little crates for Dead Zone, which are not finished yet. They've only just had a wash on them, so a lot of dry brushing to come in their future. Different colours as well. These ones are a bit red. And on the airbrush station at the moment, I have mostly Age of Sigmar stuff. I've got my Cecil the Magical Unicorn, and I've also got one Dead Zone Plague guy with a grenade launcher. So that is going to be fun as well. I do like painting those Plague guys because I've come across a really simple colour scheme for them that, again, involves dry brushing. I'm learning to love the dry brush. I know there are some people out there that hate dry brushing, but it takes a model from one level up to the next, I think. Skillful dry brushing, not just willy-nilly. And if you concentrate it more heavily in certain areas, so there is actually a skill to it. It's not just completely smearing the whole model in dry brushing, like I know some people look down on. Let's see, some people say they look fantastic. Excellent. That Stormcast guy, the gold is nowhere near done yet. I'm still on the base coat stage. Apart from the monster's skin, that's the only bit that's finished with the scales. Let's see. On the channel, I've got a couple of interesting projects coming up. So video-wise, in terms of live shows, of course, this is going to continue. But it's not exactly a live show, but live or hangout-related games. I'm thinking with the Dragon Strike that's planned, which is kind of like Hero Quest, already got everyone lined up who's going to be involved in that. I think that's going to be possibly recorded in a hangout, but not live, because I want to be able to edit it. Because I think there is going to be a bit of downtime, because it's going to take quite a long time, possibly, to play each time. And if there are any points where we're kind of pausing to look up the rules, I want to be able to snip those bits out, so it possibly won't be live, unless there's huge demand for it live. In terms of live hangout games, I think with Relics version 2 dropping the morale rule, that my anticipation for Relics version 2, if it was here, it's now there, with the morale being taken out. That was the main stumbling block for me and Relics. That was the one rule that I really didn't like at all. And that being completely gone has really, really got me a lot more interested in playing that again. It's enticed me back in, as it were. So I may look to kind of rejuvenate the Relics Hangout League at some point, because the last one kind of died a death because no one was really interested in it, to be honest. The community started to dry up, and I wasn't that interested in playing it because there were a lot of other games that I was getting into at that particular time. The Soul Assassin is in the house and wants to know how everyone's doing. Well, I'm doing quite wonderfully, even though I do look a little bit like a floating head with a stripe down here. If I go like this, I suppose it's a slightly different shade of orange, this t-shirt. It's a nice shiny material. This background is actually more like t-shirt material than my t-shirt is. This actually is t-shirt material. And it's actually much wider than my previous screens, which is why I'm able to be more zoomed out. Like this bit here, it actually curves round the wall. So you probably can't tell, but I'm actually right in the corner here. And the corner is right there. That is the corner of the room right there. So this bit is wall, but you can't tell because I've got it curved round. That's the magic of the high-tech wizardry that I have going on this channel with my technical know-how. So what else have I got coming up? Well, I'm going to be attending probably over the next 2 months 3 Kings of War tournaments, because I checked the dates and checked them off against the football calendar, since of course I do have a season ticket at Manchester City, which I spend good money on, so I can't be attending tournaments when there are matches going on. But it doesn't clash with 3 tournaments, which is good. However, it does clash with the Kings of War Clash of Kings, which is a 2-day, like the big tournament of the year, so I can't attend that. The fact that it's 2 days meant that it was always likely that it would clash, which is of course perfect since it's the Clash of Kings, so I'm not going to be able to attend that. But I am going to be at all the warm-up events, so maybe if I can crush everyone's spirit there, then it'll cause them to have a crisis of confidence and ruin their chances at Clash of Kings, so I can still impact the biggest tournament of the year in some way. More likely, though, I'll just be a nice warm-up for them. Not that my list is going to be particularly crazy, but these are going to be the first Kings of War tournaments where I'm taking 2 units of trolls, which I'm looking forward to very much, because the one game I've had with them so far, they did very, very well. Because they are probably my favourite unit in there, and only having 1 unit previously, I don't think I was able to get enough out of them because they were such an obvious target for the enemy, because they are the one big hitting unit I've got. And then the giants, who are also hard-hitting, their attacks are less reliable. And also, people don't necessarily target them just because they can still countercharge you even when they are. My mind has gone completely blank. Even when they are. What is the word? They're not routed. They are wavered. There we go. Wavered. When the giants are wavered, they can still countercharge you, but the trolls can't. So people would attack the trolls, charge them, probably with their cavalry that are faster than them, waver them, and then the trolls are just stuck. And there's my big hard-hitting unit out of the game. But with 2 units, they may have more trouble doing that. And it makes the troll bruiser more useful in my list as well. Retrobie TV, beef up the trolls. They are great. Yes, they are. Auric Love God. Tournament 2k or 2.5k points wise. I think most of the Kings of War tournaments are 2,000. I haven't seen one that's 2.5 yet. It would be interesting though. I'm not sure my goblins can stretch that far. Feasibly, I'd have to start putting more items in there again. 1.5k would be interesting as well because the games would go by faster. Was Gob, season ticket for City. Guess someone has to get them. Yes, and someone has been getting them for the last, I'm not sure if it's quite 25 years yet, but it's over 20 years that I've had a season ticket. So I see all these memes online saying things that appeared in the last 10 years, or in the last 12 years, Facebook, Twitter, Manchester City fans. And I'll think, that's not quite how I remember it. I remember being in the 3rd tier of English football, sitting among my fellow 30,000 fans in the stadium. And I seem to remember them being there all that time ago. So I don't think that has any merit. Mini Warrior, go Leicester. Now, I think you are jumping on a bit of a bandwagon there. Sonny Jim. Idiot Proof Dalek. Idiot Proof Dalek, there's a name. 2,500 gives you all the goodies, but 2,000 you have to make choices. Yes, in terms of points, you do have to make sacrifices at 2,000 points. I can't fit absolutely everything I want in there. At 2,500, I can go nuts with my army. Retrobia TV, what's your largest Kings of War army? I don't know, actually. I could make sizable dwarf and undead armies. If I take absolutely every undead model I have, I could probably get to just above 2,000. And now, if I put artifacts in there, I could get 2,500 dwarves. I'm not sure, actually, because certain units, I don't have the right amount for Kings of War because I had it built for Warhammer Fantasy. So I would have to use certain units kind of proxying or like handgunners sitting on the back of a unit of something else to make up the numbers. I could probably get to 2,000 with them easily, though, still. The goblins, I'm adding more to the goblins all the time. So with a few artifacts, 2,500, it might be a little bit too far. 2,000, I'm finding, isn't quite perfect, though, because I've gone beyond that now. So I think for my goblins, the perfect points total for a game would be probably about 2,200. I think I could fit in everything I want there. Because at 2,000, I may have to leave out one of my giants. As terrifying as that prospect is, they have been terrible for me in most of the tournaments. So I think one of them is going to get the boot, at least for now. With 2,500, I could just take 2 of them and not worry about it, though. Let's see. It's not bandwagon. I enjoy the way they play. Mini Warrior. Well, yeah, that's fair enough if you like the way that Leicester play football. It's certainly an interesting way. It's kind of unique in this day and age. I'm not going to talk too much about football on this show because I'm sure the audience would start to drop like flies. Let's see, is there anything else I want to discuss? Looking around the room for anything that inspires me to discuss it. Yes, there is one thing. My paint collection is slowly moving away from Citadel right now. On my little, it's not exactly a shelf. It's like it's a DVD case, a DVD rack, really, with drawers that pull out that my monitor sits on top of, and my paints take up the top of that, and then more space down here as well next to it. But more of my paints are becoming game color. I've got one army painter paint, but I think that was just free in a box of Mantic something or other, I believe. So when I get a new paint now, unless it's a wash, I generally go for game colour because I'm sick and tired of the GW paints drying up. Unless I happen to be going past a Games Workshop store at the time, then I only really go for their washes now, like these big bottles. And I did see someone on Facebook actually spilt one of these, which is the ultimate nightmare because they're so big, it's so likely to happen as well. Just praying that you can get a reasonable way down the bottle before it spills. But I am mainly moving on to game colour now. I'm finding the coverage on them is about comparable to GW's paints for the most part. There are a few, like the red, where it takes a couple of coats for it to be really strong, but I'm not too worried about that. I'm starting to learn that maybe I'll have to apply more than one coat with my paints. I've been learning from Warhammer TV, Mr. Duncan. He always does multiple layers, although you never actually see him do it because the power of editing. You don't know if he's got like a slave race of Oompa Loompas that do all his painting for him, especially that big Realm of Battleboard that he painted recently. I'm not convinced he did all that dry brushing on his own. You never know, though. I haven't had any issues with drying up game colour paints yet whatsoever from these dropper bottles. Citadel just dry up willy-nilly, especially certain colours like orange, which is why I went for game colour orange last time I invested in an orange. So very, very pleased with how they're going, even if they occasionally take more coats. And metallics as well. Game colour metallics, I'm not entirely sold on them yet because I found that they're a little bit on the thick and gritty side compared to the GW ones, and watering them down makes them go really weird, I've found. So if anyone's got any tips on which metallic paints are the best ones to go for, there is one metallic paint I'm really happy with, actually, which came free. I think this may have been in some kind of Adepticon swag bag or something. This is Master Series paint. I think this is from Reaper, and this is the old bronze colour. So this is metallic, and I really like this. It's very similar to the, what is the name of the Citadel paint? I've got it right here. It is, nope, that's Gehenna's Gold. It's not that. I think it's Rune, yeah, they're Rune Lord Brass. This old bronze, to my partially colourblind eye, it's very, very similar, but it doesn't dry up, which is a big deal. And apart from that, it's just good all round. There's no issues with the consistency or anything. I haven't felt the need to particularly water it down. It's not going on too thick or gritty like the Vallejo Game Colour Gunmetal Metal is. So not too thrilled with that one. But for the most part, Vallejo is my paint of choice at the moment. Very much been converted from Citadel paints, and I'm not sure I'll ever completely go back. Could be too late for me. Let's see what people are saying in there. Idiot Proof Dalek. Don't try model colour metallics. Something wrong with them. Mickey Jenver. Vallejo metal colour. It's so much better than other metallics. That is hard to believe. Yeah, most metallics seem to be terrible, don't they? It's weird. The Citadel ones go really dry and thick too fast for my liking, which is really annoying. They're one of the most annoying kind of paints to water down, metallics, as many people probably know. So actually, when this show's over, if anyone's not watching this live, if anyone has any tips on metallic paints, I want to hear all about it because that's something I could definitely use a hand with. Dreddy is a big fan of game colour. Auric Lovegod, try Reaper Master Series. Mini Warrior has spilled 3 of the new wash bottles. Oh dear, that must have set you back a substantial amount of money. A substantial amount indeed. I haven't opened the Nuln oil yet because I haven't finished my previous pot of Nuln oil, which is here. But to save on postage, I ordered this at the same time as my Agrax Earthshade, which is going down. Not at an alarming rate, but it's getting down there. I haven't spilt it yet. The one wash that I currently own that I did spill is around here somewhere. It's red. I think it's the Carroburg Crimson paint, or the wash. I spilt that a couple of times over the years. Not for a while, though. I haven't spilt paint in quite some time. I may be tempting fate here. I'm also going to say that I haven't cut myself with a hobby knife in quite some time either. So I think I may be cursing myself there. I actually saw on Facebook earlier that the great Jojo man cut a huge slice into his finger with a hobby knife. So, of course, we all wish him a very speedy recovery with that. I don't think he's going to lose the finger or anything, but it looked like a really deep cut. So that just reminded me how long it's been since my fingers have had any kind of serious wound on them. It does make hobbying much more difficult when you're dealing with a finger injury, doesn't it? So I've been lucky for quite a while now. Okay, I think we're going to wrap this one up. So if anyone else has any more paint talk, save it for the permanent comments after the show. You may have to leave it 15 minutes before it allows you to comment, which is really annoying. But I would appreciate any paint advice, especially metallics, on brands that work well, or on a suitable method of watering down the other brands that aren't so good, or the ones that I currently have, which would be very helpful because I wouldn't have to spend more money. So get that in the permanent comments rather than in the chat box there, just to make sure that I see it and I can follow those tips. And with that, I'm going to share this beautiful tournament-related image again, which I think just about sums up the tournament scene in general. Of course, I am the winner. Whether it says that officially is irrelevant, because I am the winner in the hearts and minds of all of my audience, I think. All 20 of you that are watching right now, which is a pretty good number for this show, considering it's only been going for a few episodes. And a lot of people, oddly enough, you may not believe this, but some people have better things to do on a Friday night. I know it's hard to believe, but apparently some people are out like in the real world doing things, especially now. They're out catching Pokemon and everything. So thanks to the audience for joining me, especially those of you that have been here the whole time, commenting away, contributing to no end. And if I don't see you in the Andy and Rem show chat on Tuesday night, then I'll see you again on 2D6 Friday. Of course, next Friday. Good night out there. Whatever you are.